Section 4 of Nonsense Novels. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Nonsense Novels by Stephen Leacock. Section 4. Gertrude the Governess, or Simple 17. Synopsis of previous chapters. There are no previous chapters. It was a wild and stormy night on the west coast of Scotland. This, however, is immaterial to the present story, as the scene is not laid in the west of Scotland. For the matter of that, the weather was just as bad on the east coast of Ireland. But the scene of this narrative is laid in the south of England, and takes place on and around Knotacentinum Towers, pronounced as if written Nosham Taws, the seat of the Lord Knottacent, pronounced as if written Nosh. But it is not necessary to pronounce either of these names in reading them. Nosham Taws was a typical English home. The main part of the house was an Elizabethan structure of warm red brick, while the elder portion, of which the Earl was inordinately proud, still showed the outlines of a Norman keep, to which had been added a Lancastrian jail and a Plantagenet orphan asylum. From the house in all directions stretched magnificent woodland and park with oaks and elms of immemorial antiquity, while nearer the house stood raspberry bushes and geranium plants which had been set out by the Crusaders. About the grand old mansion, the air was loud with the chirping of thrushes, the cawing of partridges, and the clear sweet note of the rook, while deer, antelope, and other quadrupeds strutted about the lawn so tame as to eat off the sundial. In fact, the place was a regular menagerie. From the house downwards through the park stretched a beautiful broad avenue laid out by Henry VII. Lord Nosh stood upon the hearthrug of the library. Trained diplomat and statesman as he was, his stern aristocratic face was upside down with fury. "Boy," he said, "you shall marry this girl, or I disinherit you. You are no son of mine." Young Lord Ronald, erect before him, flung back a glance as defiant as his own. "I defy you," he said. "Henceforth you are no father of mine. I will get another. I will marry none but a woman I can love. This girl that we have never seen—" "Fool!" said the Earl. "Would you throw aside our estate and name of 1,000 years? The girl, I am told, is beautiful. Her aunt is willing. They are French. Pah! They understand such things in France." "But your reason—" "I give no reason," said the Earl. "Listen, Ronald, I give 1 month. For that time you remain here. If at the end of it you refuse me, I cut you off with a shilling." Lord Ronald said nothing. He flung himself from the room, flung himself upon his horse, and rode madly off in all directions. As the door of the library closed upon Ronald, the Earl sank into a chair. His face changed. It was no longer that of the haughty nobleman, but of the hunted criminal. "He must marry the girl," he muttered. "Soon she will know all. Tuchamoff has escaped from Siberia. He knows, and will tell. The whole of the mines pass to her, this property with it, and but enough." He rose, walked to the sideboard, drained a dipper full of gin and bitters, and became again a high-bred English gentleman. It was at this moment that a high dog-cart, driven by a groom in the livery of Earl Nosh, might have been seen entering the avenue of Nosham Taws. Beside him sat a young girl, scarce more than a child, in fact not nearly so big as the groom. The apple-pie hat which she wore, surmounted with black willow plumes, concealed from view a face so face-like in its appearance as to be positively facial. It was, need we say it, Gertrude the Governess, who was this day to enter upon her duties at Nosham Taws. At the same time that the dog-cart entered the avenue at one end, there might have been seen riding down it from the other a tall young man, whose long, aristocratic face proclaimed his birth, and who was mounted upon a horse with a face even longer than his own. And who is this tall young man who draws nearer to Gertrude with every revolution of the horse? Ah, who indeed? Ah, who? I wonder if any of my readers could guess that this was none other than Lord Ronald. The two were destined to meet. Nearer and nearer they came. and then still nearer. Then for one brief moment they met, and as they passed Gertrude raised her head and directed towards the young nobleman two eyes so eye-like in their expression as to be absolutely circular, while Lord Ronald directed towards the occupant of the dog-cart a gaze so gaze-like that nothing but a gazelle or a gas-pipe could have emulated its intensity. Was this the dawn of love? Wait and see. Do not spoil the story. Let us speak of Gertrude. Gertrude Montmorency McFiggin had known neither father nor mother. They had both died years before she was born. Of her mother she knew nothing, save that she was French, was extremely beautiful, and that all her ancestors and even her business acquaintances had perished in the Revolution. Yet Gertrude cherished the memory of her parents. On her breast the girl wore a locket in which was enshrined a miniature of her mother, while down her neck inside the back hung a daguerreotype of her father. She carried a portrait of her grandmother up her sleeve and had pictures of her cousins tucked inside her boot, while beneath her—but enough, quite enough. Of her father Gertrude knew even less. That he was a high-born English gentleman who had lived as a wanderer in many lands, this was all she knew. His only legacy to Gertrude had been a Russian grammar, a Romanian phrase book, a theodolite, and a work on mining engineering. From her earliest infancy Gertrude had been brought up by her aunt. Her aunt had carefully instructed her in Christian principles. She had also taught her Mohammedanism to make sure. When Gertrude was 17, her aunt had died of hydrophobia. The circumstances were mysterious. There had called upon her that day a strange bearded man in the costume of the Russians. After he had left, Gertrude had found her aunt in a syncope from which she passed into an apostrophe and never recovered. To avoid scandal, it was called hydrophobia. Gertrude was thus thrown upon the world. What to do? That was the problem that confronted her. It was while musing one day upon her fate that Gertrude's eye was struck with an advertisement. Wanted, a governess, must possess a knowledge of French, Italian, Russian, and Romanian, music, and mining engineering. Salary £1 4s. and 4d. halfpenny per annum. Apply between 11:30 and 25 minutes to 12 at No. 41 A.6 Belgravia Terrace, the Countess of Nosh. Gertrude was a girl of great natural quickness of apprehension, and she had not pondered over this announcement more than half an hour before she was struck with the extraordinary coincidence between the list of items desired and the things that she herself knew. She duly presented herself at Belgravia Terrace before the Countess, who advanced to meet her with a charm which at once placed the girl at her ease. "You are proficient in French?" she asked. "Oh, oui," said Gertrude modestly. "And Italian," continued the Countess. "Oh, si," said Gertrude. "And German?" said the Countess in delight. "Ah, ja," said Gertrude. "And Russian?" "Ja." "And Romanian?" "Yep." Amazed at the girl's extraordinary proficiency in modern languages, the Countess looked at her narrowly. Where had she seen those lineaments before? She passed her hand over her brow in thought, and spit upon the floor, but no, the face baffled her. "Enough," she said. "I engage you on the spot. Tomorrow you go down to Nosham Taws and begin teaching the children. I must add that in addition you will be expected to aid the Earl with his Russian correspondence. He has large mining interests at Tschminsk." Tschminsk! Why did the simple word reverberate upon Gertrude's ears? Why? Because it was the name written in her father's hand on the title page of his book on mining. What mystery was here? It was on the following day that Gertrude had driven up the avenue. She descended from the dog-cart, passed through a phalanx of liveried servants drawn up 7 deep, to each of whom she gave a sovereign as she passed, and entered Nosham Taws. "Welcome," said the Countess, as she aided Gertrude to carry her trunk upstairs. The girl presently descended and was ushered into the library, where she was presented to the Earl. As soon as the Earl's eye fell upon the face of the new governess, he started visibly. Where had he seen those lineaments? Where was it? At the races, or the theatre, on a bus, no. Some subtler thread of memory was stirring in his mind. He strode hastily to the sideboard, drained a dipper and a half of brandy, and became again the perfect English gentleman. While Gertrude has gone to the nursery to make the acquaintance of the two tiny golden-haired children who are to be her charges, let us say something here of the Earl and his son. Lord Nosh was the perfect type of the English nobleman and statesman. The years that he had spent in the diplomatic service at Constantinople, St. Petersburg, and Salt Lake City had given to him a peculiar finesse and noblesse, while his long residence at St. Helena, Pitcairn Island, and Hamilton, Ontario, had rendered him impervious to external expressions. As deputy paymaster of the militia of the county he had seen something of the sterner side of military life, while his hereditary office of groom of the Sunday breeches had brought him into direct contact with royalty itself. His passion for outdoor sports endeared him to his tenants. A keen sportsman, he excelled in fox hunting, dog hunting, pig killing, bat catching, and the pastimes of his class. In this latter respect Lord Ronald took after his father. From the start the lad had shown the greatest promise. At Eton he had made a splendid showing at battledore and shuttlecock, and at Cambridge had been first in his class at needlework. Already his name was whispered in connection with the All England Ping-Pong Championship, a triumph which would undoubtedly carry with it a seat in Parliament. Thus was Gertrude the governess installed at Nosham Taws. The days and the weeks sped past. The simple charm of the beautiful orphan girl attracted all hearts. Her two little pupils became her slaves. "Me loves oo," the little Rasahel would say, leaning her golden head in Gertrude's lap. Even the servants loved her. The head gardener would bring a bouquet of beautiful roses to her room before she was up, the second gardener a bunch of early cauliflowers, the third a spray of late asparagus, and even the 10th and 11th a sprig of mangel wurzel of an armful of hay. Her room was full of gardeners all the time, while at evening the aged butler, touched at the friendless girl's loneliness, would tap softly at her door and bring her a rye whiskey and a seltzer, or a box of Pittsburgh stogies. Even the dumb creatures seemed to admire her in their own dumb way. The dumb rooks settled on her shoulder, and every dumb dog about the place followed her. And Ronald! Ah, Ronald! Yes, indeed, they had met, they had spoken. "What a dull morning," Gertrude had said. "Quel triste matin! Was für ein allumverdammter Tag!" "Beastly," Ronald had answered. Beastly! The word rang in Gertrude's ears all day. After that they were constantly together. They played tennis and ping-pong in the day, and in the evening, in accordance with the stiff routine of the place, they sat down with the Earl and Countess to 25-cent poker, and later still they sat together on the veranda, and watched the moon sweeping in great circles around the horizon. It was not long before Gertrude realized that Lord Ronald felt towards her a warmer feeling than that of mere ping-pong. At times in her presence he would fall, especially after dinner, into a fit of profound subtraction. Once at night, when Gertrude withdrew to her chamber, and before seeking her pillow prepared to retire as a preliminary to disrobing, in other words before going to bed, she flung wide the casement, opened the window, and saw, the face of Lord Ronald. He was sitting on a thorn bush beneath her, and his upturned face wore an expression of agonized pallor. Meanwhile the days passed. Life at the Taws moved in the ordinary routine of a great English household. At 7 a gong sounded for rising, at 8 a horn blew for breakfast, at 8:30 a whistle sounded for prayers, at 1 a flag was run up at half-mast for lunch, at 4 a gun was fired for afternoon tea, at 9 a first bell sounded for dressing, at 9:15 a second bell for going on dressing, while at 9:30 a rocket was sent up to indicate that dinner was ready. At midnight dinner was over, and at 1 a.m. the tolling of a bell summoned the domestics to evening prayers. Meanwhile the month allotted by the Earl to Lord Ronald was passing away. It was already July 15, then within a day or two it was July 17, and almost immediately afterwards, July 18. At times the Earl, in passing Ronald in the hall, would say sternly, "Remember, boy, your consent, or I disinherit you." And what were the Earl's thoughts of Gertrude? Here was the one drop of bitterness in the girl's cup of happiness. For some reason that she could not divine, the Earl showed signs of marked antipathy. Once as she passed the door of the library, he threw a bootjack at her. On another occasion, at lunch alone with her, he struck her savagely across the face with a sausage. It was her duty to translate to the Earl his Russian correspondence. She sought it in vain for the mystery. One day a Russian telegram was handed to the Earl. Gertrude translated it to him aloud. "Tutchemoff went to the woman. She is dead." On hearing this the Earl became livid with fury. In fact, this was the day that he struck her with the sausage. Then one day while the Earl was absent on a bat hunt, Gertrude, who was turning over his correspondence, with that sweet feminine instinct of interest that rose superior to ill treatment, suddenly found the key to the mystery. Lord Nosh was not the rightful owner of the Tawse. His distant cousin of the older line, the true heir, had died in a Russian prison to which the machinations of the Earl, while ambassador at Tschminsk, had consigned him. The daughter of this cousin was the true owner of Nosham Taws. The family story, save only that the documents before her withheld the name of the rightful heir, lay bare to Gertrude's eye. Strange is the heart of woman. Did Gertrude turn from the Earl with spurning? No. Her own sad fate had taught her sympathy. Yet still the mystery remained. Why did the Earl start perceptibly each time that he looked into her face? Sometimes he started as much as 4 centimeters, so that one could distinctly see him do it. On such occasions he would hastily drain a dipper of rum and vichy water and become again the correct English gentleman. The denouement came swiftly. Gertrude never forgot it. It was the night of the great ball at Nosham Taws. The whole neighborhood was invited. How Gertrude's heart had beat with anticipation, and with what trepidation she had overhauled her scant wardrobe in order to appear not unworthy in Lord Ronald's eyes. Her resources were poor indeed, yet the inborn genius for dress that she had inherited from her French mother stood her in good stead. She twined a single rose in her hair and contrived herself a dress out of a few old newspapers and the inside of an umbrella that would have graced a court. Round her waist she bound a single braid of bag string, while a piece of old lace that had been her mother's was suspended to her ear by a thread. Gertrude was the cynosure of all eyes. Floating to the strains of the music, she presented a picture of bright girlish innocence that no one could see undisenraptured. The ball was at its height. It was away up. Ronald stood with Gertrude in the shrubbery. They looked into one another's eyes. "Gertrude," he said, "I love you." Simple words, and yet they thrilled every fibre in the girl's costume. "Ronald!" she said, and cast herself about his neck. At this moment the Earl appeared standing beside them in the moonlight. His stern face was distorted with indignation. "So," he said, turning to Ronald, "it appears that you have chosen." "I have," said Ronald with hauteur. "You prefer to marry this penniless girl rather than the heiress I have selected for you." Gertrude turned from father to son in amazement. "Yes," said Ronald. "Be it so," said the Earl, draining a dipper of gin which he carried, and resuming his calm. "Then I disinherit you. Leave this place and never return to it." "Come, Gertrude," said Ronald tenderly, "let us flee together." Gertrude stood before them. The rose had fallen from her head. The lace had fallen from her ear, and the bag string had come undone from her waist. Her newspapers were crumpled beyond recognition. But dishevelled and illegible as she was, She was still mistress of herself. "Never," she said firmly. "Ronald, you shall never make this sacrifice for me." Then to the Earl in tones of ice, "There is a pride, sir, as great even as yours. The daughter of Metchnikoff McFiggin need crave a boon from no one." With that she hauled from her bosom the daguerreotype of her father and pressed it to her lips. The Earl started as if shot. "That name!" he cried. "That face! That photograph! Stop!" There is no need to finish. My readers have long since divined it. Gertrude was the heiress. The lovers fell into one another's arms. The Earl's proud face relaxed. "God bless you," he said. The Countess and the guests came pouring out upon the lawn. The breaking day illuminated a scene of gay congratulations. Gertrude and Ronald were wed. Their happiness was complete. Need we say more? Yes, only this. The Earl was killed in the hunting field a few days after. The Countess was struck by lightning. The two children fell down a well. Thus the happiness of Gertrude and Ronald was complete. End of Section 4. Recording by Trisha G.